Hello again. I'm back. Lou Bryson, author of Whiskey Masterclass. I'm here with another triple shot for you. To try something different today. I've got 3 whiskeys from one distiller. Just did an episode of the regular video cast I do, a sip of knowledge, with my co-host Liz Rhodes. And we were talking to Ann Marshall and Scott Blackwell of HighWire Distilling in Charleston, South Carolina. I met them about 6 years ago in Charleston at a beverage conference, and kind of kept up with them since because just really interesting people doing really interesting things. And the reason we had them on the show is because they're doing a lot with heirloom grains. So these 3 whiskeys that they sent me their rye whiskey finished in Tawny Port barrels. I've got a real problem with the light. There we go. Finished in Tawny Port barrels. This is the straight bourbon whiskey made with Jimmy Red corn, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And this is the Jimmy Red bourbon finished in Oloroso Sherry casks. Unfortunately, I don't have a price or an alcohol by volume on that. I'll try and get that and put it in the notes. But these are just samples sent to me for the show. So we're going to start with the rye because that's what Scott advised. Now, the Jimmy Red corn is not the only heirloom grain here. This is done with Abruzzi rye. That's the same rye that Todd Leopold uses at Leopold Brothers out in Colorado. I go with a thing that I heard Steve Jones at the Bread Lab at University of Washington say, that it doesn't really matter if it's heirloom if it doesn't taste better, if it doesn't offer something. Just being an heirloom grain is merely something to talk about. It's not really something to make it better. It's just a story. So now this is finished in Tawny Port barrels, and again, I'm getting the same effect I got during the show, which is when I'm first nosing it here, wow, I'm really getting the rye. I'm getting the oiliness of the rye. I'm getting a little bit of spice, and I'm getting some of that floral character that Todd has talked about with the Abruzzi. It's almost like a lilac or violet. But then a little bit of that port cask kicks in. There's a fruity sweetness. So let's try some. So this is what I really think, that port finish with rye is not a bad idea at all. Port finish on rye whiskey just seems to meld better. I've had a couple of sherry finished ryes, just didn't work as well. This is a young rye. I want to say, yeah, I'm not seeing it, but I'm guessing this is under 4 years old. See, that's really cool because it's sweet, but it's not like really sweet, like cloying sweet. It's more like kind of like an unsweetened pastry. Well, today is Mardi Gras, Shrove Tuesday, Fat Tuesday, or as we call it here in Pennsylvania, Fosnot Day. So this morning I had some Fosnots, which are an unsweetened donut. It's just a plain donut. You can have them sweetened, but the first one I had today was a plain one. But it still tastes sweet. It's just that grain sweetness. But then you also get the bitterness from the rye, and you get the sweetness from the port cask. And it's just really well balanced. Everything comes together in the finish. That's where it's the best. A little bit thin across the mouth, but at the finish, everything comes together, and it's really beautiful. So, next one. Next one is the straight bourbon, 2 years old. They told me it's running about 2.5. made from 100% Jimmy Red corn. Jimmy Red corn is an heirloom strain, comes from James Island, South Carolina, hence the Jimmy, and the red is from the corn itself is quite red when it's dried, high level of anthocyanins. And of course, that flavor, that color doesn't come across in distillation. Distillate's clear. It's like water. But anthocyanin actually has some flavor to it, so you do get the red, you just don't, you taste it, you don't see it. So how does this stuff taste? Well, first off, I got to tell you, those of you who know me know that I absolutely abhor young bourbon. They're young rye, awesome. Love young rye. Bourbon under 3 years, yeah, under 4 years I'm not really nuts about, but under 3 years, This is the very best under 3-year-old bourbon I've ever had. I can smell like a flintiness, a fruitiness of the corn. And this is not a finished whiskey. This is just distillate in new bourbon barrels, in new charred white oak. Yeah, now, Jimmy Red is, I have heard, related to Bloody Butcher, but I don't know that for sure. So I'm not going to, don't quote me on it. I'm just laying it out there for it's what I heard. But it's got that same kind of almost like a cake-like character to it. There's a little bit of like a red fruit, a little bit of berry. And a creaminess. And again, for 2.5 years, this is incredibly ready to go. Scott was saying that they have some that's up around 6, and he's starting to wonder if it isn't ready to dip. Now, they're in South Carolina, in the low country. It's hot down there. I've been down there. It's swampy hot. But that's really pretty good for 2.5 years. It's got the sweet. It's got the oak. None of it's overdone. They're working with a fairly low entry proof. I think they've got a nice thing going. Now, this last one is Jimmy Red, 100% bourbon, or 100% Jimmy Red bourbon, finished in an Oloroso Sherry cask. Again, not a thing you'll see that often, but they told me that when they were talking to Dave Pickerel when they were first getting started, one of the things Dave told them was, don't try to out Maker's Mark. So do something different. Find a thing that is different for you. Jimmy Red corn, but also a sherry cask finish. Wow. Yeah, and you can smell that right away. It's got that, what they call it, like the dried waxy fruit. I like to think it's a little, maybe a little like butter candy. The sherry really comes through big, but there's definitely an underlayer of the bourbon oak, the charred white, and the corn. Yeah, see now, on the palate, the sherry is much more restrained, and you're getting more bourbon. And again, it's that not quite bourbon of an heirloom strain. This corn is definitely different. And yet the sherry kind of stretches it across the palate. There's a broadness there, and what you call a grip. It's not quite as stringent, but it's kind of a pull at your tongue. It's very pleasant. The sherry's coming through nicely. The bourbon, I might back off on the sherry finish a little bit, maybe a couple months here. I'm not sure how long it is in there. I know they said that the rye is in the port barrels for 6 months to a year. if the bourbon's in the sherry for that long, I would pull off of it a little bit. But that's eminently drinkable. If you're a bourbon and a Scotch drinker, you should find this stuff because it kind of scratches both itch. Both itches? Yeah, scratches both itches. That's it. Because you definitely have that sherry aging, all those components, that dried fruit, that waxiness. But at the same time, you got the bourbon guts. And again, under 3 years old, and yet just integrated, and I hesitate to use it. No, I don't. I'll piss people off. Smooth. Thank you very much. 3 really good whiskeys, which is nothing less than what I expected from an outfit that takes such care with their agriculture, with their distillation, and have from the beginning. So hats off to HighWire Distilling and their new Southern Revival line of whiskeys. That's it for me. I will be back with another triple shot, I think pretty shortly, because I want to get some Irish in before the big SPD comes up. I'd also like to drop here, as I have on Facebook and Twitter, in 2 weeks on March 15th. Please join me on A Sip of Knowledge, the video cast. You can find that on searching on Twitter or on Facebook. A Sip of Knowledge will be live Tuesday, March 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Just me and Sam Komlenik, Rye historian, and my usual partner on these shows, who has unfortunately moved away, and we're trying to get together when we can. Sam and I will be on there for an hour. That'll be available on YouTube afterwards. Join us if you can and ask any kind of questions you want. It's going to be a fun time. That's all I have for you this time. And as always, sit down and have a whiskey with somebody. Have some fun. Thanks.